I've been crocheting granny squares the same way for a lot of years. Would you believe me if I told you that this is an unblocked granny square? This is right off of my hook. I haven't done anything to it. I haven't finger blocked it. I haven't stretched it. I haven't wet it or nothing to prepare this square. All I did was weave in the ends. I wish I could say there is a reason why I brushed this off, but I'm working on a pillow, a 12 round granny square, and when I used my tried and true method of crocheting granny squares, this is what I ended up with. And that just won't do. So this led me to revisit one of my older experiments where I tested out several different ways to try to figure out how to crochet the neatest looking granny square. But again, I was only working on like 4 or 5 round granny squares, and so I seriously brushed off this thing that I'm going to show you. So I actually need 4 large granny squares for this pillow that I'm making. So I have the start of one here, and this is the only thing that I changed about my granny squares that made them totally perfect. Here's what we do. We flip it. And we're looking at the back side now. So think about it. Your back and forth projects, you have your slight lean in one direction, but then you flip it and your slight lean is in the opposite direction, so it kind of counterbalances itself. But with a granny square, you're crocheting in the same direction all the time. And while you might not notice that ever so slight lean on the first 3, 4, 5 rounds of your granny square, if you get much after that, you really start to see the lean. And that's all you do. You just flip it. It's so simple. I can't even believe that it makes this big of a difference. I really can't. Now, in order to flip it like this, I did have to slightly change the way I start and finish the round just because it looked a little bit neater when I did it this way. So I am chaining 3, and that is my first double crochet of this next round, and then making 2 more double crochets in the same corner space. So that's my 3 out of 6 that are normally in a corner, right? I'm not making a chain or anything between my clusters. Everything else is the same. All I did was turn. And I know this isn't revolutionary. It's something that maybe you're already doing, but if you're not, that's why I had to make this video, because it was just such a big deal for me. So I don't know if I can justify myself in any way. The reason why I dismissed this is really simple. If you look really closely, double crochet stitches look a little bit different on the front than they do the back. See, this is the front side, the side that's facing me as I'm crocheting them, and this is the back side where we flipped it. They look a teeny bit different. It's very subtle, but that was enough to keep me from using this tip. Even though I did see pretty good results with it in that test. By the way, I'll link that video in the description if you want to check it out. Even when you crochet 4 to 5 round granny squares, not flipping them, it still can benefit from some blocking. But if you're anything like me, you don't have a ton of time to block, I don't know, like 80 granny squares, which you would need for like a blanket. So when you crochet them like this, you don't need to block. So you're saving so much time. They look neater in the long run. It's not any more difficult. I don't know. I just can't see myself going back to my old ways of crocheting granny squares. Finish the corner with 3 double crochets. And then instead of using 2 chains like I did for all of the other corners, I found that if I just use 1, because I'm slip stitching here with the first chain of the round, the size of this corner, because of the slip stitch there, it matches the other two a little bit better. Experiment and see what looks best for you. Your crochet style and tension might be a little bit different than mine, so you might see different results. But I mean, seriously, look how perfectly square. But if you're like me and you like to use the magic knot, you might be wondering, can I still use the magic knot while turning it back and forth? And does it look okay when I do it that way? So the answer to that question is yes and yes. We'll pull up just a tiny bit and then trim the loop. Undo the slip stitch and the last double crochet. That'll give us enough yarn to work with here as we add the new color. And we'll first tie the new color around the old color. But you may want to slide that knot up a little bit so you have enough of the old color to tie around the new color of yarn. And this is how it has to be. If you're going to make a magic knot, you have to do it like this. This is the only way that it'll work and that you can depend on it working. So it should look like this. And when you pull on either color, it'll slide the two knots together. And you can give that a real nice tug. And yeah, trim right up next to the knot. And in theory, you shouldn't have to worry about it. I haven't had any issues at all with the magic knot, so until that happens, I'm gonna keep saving time. So yeah, then we'll just redo the last double crochet and the slip stitch. And that gets us perfectly set up to crochet the next round. So flip it so you're looking at the back side and slip stitch into the chain space. Make your 3 chains and you're off with a normal granny square round after that. I don't know, I have just been on this luxury yarn kick lately. It's so nice and wonderful to work with, and you know what, to some degree, actually to a pretty high degree, it has made me a lot more excited about the projects that I'm working on. Not because the yarn I was using before wasn't great, but I think just because it's different, right? It's a different experience every time, and it's fun to pick out what I have in my stash and mix and match them together and see how it looks in the project. I don't know, it made the process that much more fun. So I don't know, I think if you're struggling with motivation or you're losing your Crojo or things just aren't quite as fun as they used to be, try a stash project. Use up the yarn that you already have, and I'm pointing back at my dresser because that thing is full of yarn. But use the yarn that you have. Don't be afraid to mix and match brands and colors and textures. As long as it's relatively the same weight, you shouldn't run into issues, but I say that lightly because you might have to experiment with things. But yeah, using stash yarn, been my new thing. You know, there is one other minor adjustment that I made, not because it was the reason for the granny squares leaning or just not being straight in general, but because I liked the way it looked a little bit better. I tried starting with the magic ring, and I really like the look of that. Quite a bit better than when there's a hole there. I don't know, you know, it's all personal preference. I think at the end of the day, try this because you might be surprised at how much neater your granny squares will look, and you don't have to put in any additional effort whatsoever. Yeah, super short and sweet, I think, this week, but I just had to share this with you because it was one of those duh epiphany moments, if that's a real thing. I can't believe I didn't take this more seriously a few years ago when I tried this tip. If you need some project inspiration for testing this out, if you want to make a granny square to actually use because time is precious, right? I'll link to this pillow pattern in the description below. It takes a completely different approach to crocheting a granny square pillow. It's a little bit more modern, A little bit quicker, I think, to come together too, because you only use 4 granny squares. I will also have a link to the guide if you want to read all about this or bookmark it for later when you do have time to crochet some granny squares. You'll find that down there as well. B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF patterns. We've got some PDF pattern bundling options, and we also have some t-shirts if you're into that sort of thing. Thank you so much for the support there. I appreciate it so much. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.